Hailey, and today I'm going to be doing my March wrap-up. So I literally had to fight like every fiber of my being that was telling me that this is like a January or February wrap-up, because no, it really is a March wrap-up. I honestly can't believe it's already April. I can't say I'm sad to say goodbye to March, because March was a really weird month where I had like no motivation to do anything, but somehow I did end up still reading 10 books. If you guys wanted to follow my reading journey throughout March and see live reactions, I will link all of my reading vlogs for the month of March down below for you guys. If you guys wanted to keep up with me, don't forget to subscribe. I put up new videos every Monday and Thursday, as well as some bonus videos sometimes, so don't forget to click that little bell icon so you'll be notified whenever I post. You can also follow me on all of my social media. I will have the links and all that jazz down below. And without further ado, let's just talk about the books that I read in March. So the first book that I read in March is Bygone Badass Broads by Mackenzi. This is 52 forgotten stories of women who changed the world, and right when I read that I was like, yes, I am here for this, I love it. So I was so excited to receive a copy from Abrams Books. Thank you so much to them for sending this to me. Right when I got it, I had to read it. It has such beautiful illustrations in here, and it follows women from throughout the world of all different walks of life, and it is honestly just amazing. I did end up giving this 4 out of 5 stars overall, because my one complaint is that after you hit a certain point, which was basically the Revolutionary War in America, from then on it seemed like most of the women that were talked about were American. So that was kind of unfortunate, and I was also maybe a wee bit bitter that we didn't have one Canadian in here. There was a Dutchie though, so that made me happy. But I loved the fact that at the beginning it was really jumping all over the world, and then I felt like it wasn't so much around the world, if that makes sense. But that was a really minor issue, because overall I thought this was amazing. I think this is something that everyone should read, because these women are truly incredible and inspirational. After that, I read Girls Made of Snow and Glass by Bashardoust. This just happens to be another kind of feminist book, because this is a feminist reimagining of the Snow White fairy tale. So imagine you take Snow White and then you take Frozen, and then they have a baby, and then their baby is a hardcore feminist, and you basically get this book. It was a very loose retelling of those fairy tales, but it did definitely take certain elements of those and made it into this dark, weird, just very inventive story that I really enjoyed. The kind of feminist aspect to this story was my favorite part of it, because I love the fact that you have these two women who everything in their lives has been pitting them together, but they kind of refuse to hate each other. I really enjoyed seeing a friendship that worked like that, because that's not something you often read about when it deals with females in positions of power. Usually they're pitted against each other, and that wasn't the case. However, in the world building area, this was lacking quite a bit, so that was kind of unfortunate and lessened my enjoyment of the story overall. So overall, I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I picked up another fantasy, and that was The Traitor's Game by Jennifer A. Nielsen. Jennifer A. Nielsen is quite well known in the middle grade area, because she has a series, I think it's The False Prince or something like that. Yeah, The False Prince, and that is quite popular, but this is her first venture into the YA genre. Now, this was a really solid fantasy. It follows a girl who has spent her last 3 years in exile, and then she ends up being drawn back into her father's dangerous politics. So it was quite heavy in the political aspect, but I felt like overall it was also really heavy with cliches. That's not to say I didn't enjoy it, because it was a really enjoyable read, but I think a lot of things were things that I had seen done before, and it was just kind of the framework for a typical fantasy, but with different characters and world. So that definitely made it hard for me to love this as much as I wanted to, because I did really enjoy the characters, but I kept on waiting for things to kind of stray from the typical path of fantasies, and it never really did that for me. So because of that, I ended up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think it was a solid fantasy. It would be a good fantasy to start off with if you're transitioning from middle grade into the YA genre, but for the amount of high fantasies and stuff like that that I've read, I think it just didn't really meet my expectations. Next is A Mad Wicked Folly by Sharon Waller. This follows a young girl who wants to be an artist, and she wants to be an artist so badly, and she ends up posing nude for her art class because she sees all the guys doing it, and she's like, why can't I do it? It's nothing sexual, it's just appreciating the beauty that is the human body. However, obviously other people in Edwardian England don't exactly see it like that, so they are completely scandalized when she ends up getting caught, and it basically ruins her entire social status that her parents have spent so long trying to build up. Now obviously the main character, Victoria, doesn't really care about that. She just sees herself as trying to create art, but this is also at the time of the suffragette movement. So the suffragette movement ends up being quite appealing to her. Now the suffragette movement is the beginnings of feminism, but but it's definitely not perfect, and I feel remiss to not acknowledge that. It was quite a racist movement for a number of reasons. I encourage you to look it up and educate yourself on that. However, it did provide kind of the grassroots for modern day feminism with its intersectionality, which is super, super important. Now, that aside, I did really enjoy this book. I felt like Victoria Darling was a great character, and I loved the combination of her just wanting to create art and create a name for herself and not really being held by society's restrictions and wanting to get involved with the suffragette movement. I've never read a book about the suffragette movement, so I found that to be really interesting, but the concept unfortunately wasn't reached to its full potential in my opinion. The combination of the characters and the time period was great, but ultimately it ended up being a story that I felt really dragged, and it was kind of hard for me to get through in the end, so I ended up giving it a 3 or a 3.25 out of 5 stars. I'm not too sure yet. Next, I listened to the audiobook for Far From the Tree by Robin Benway. Far From the Tree is a story that is compared to This Is Us, the TV show, which I've only seen a few episodes of, but I definitely see why it is compared because it's a very emotionally intense story dealing with sibling relationships. It also deals with adoption as a main topic because all 3 of these siblings have been adopted out or end up in foster care. So you follow these 3 siblings who all come from different walks of life, and they end up meeting each other for the first time, and they end up going on a journey to try and find their mother. I loved seeing the relationship between these 3 grow. I felt like they were such amazing characters, and I think the triple perspective that you get in this book worked so well because you didn't have the biases of one perspective. You got to see everything from the perspective of each character who has come from a completely different background. Even though they share the same DNA, they had different upbringings. This book was honestly beautiful, such a great story, and I really, really loved it. I felt like it was so well done, very emotional, but it really got to the core of that sibling relationship and examined adoption and foster care really well, and I don't think I've ever read a book that has done that, so I thoroughly enjoyed it. I also highly recommend the audiobook. I think the narrators did a great job, so if you wanted to check it out, I am actually an Audible affiliate now. I haven't done that before, but I figured since I recommend audiobooks all the time, I might as well. But if you click the link down below and sign up for a free trial, you can get your first audiobook for free, which is amazing. Next, I read Matilda by Roald Dahl. I actually listened to the audiobook for this one once again. It was narrated by Kate Winslet, and she did an amazing job. It was so much fun, and I thoroughly enjoyed listening to this. I watched the Matilda movie when I was a kid, and I honestly haven't watched it since I was probably like 7 or something like that, so I don't really remember the story very well. I definitely don't remember the kind of like magical element that was in this story. That threw me right off, but overall, it was so much fun. Matilda is such a fantastic character to follow. I totally see why this is such kind of a quintessential classic for children. I felt like it was so good and just really heartwarming and an easy, fun read. So if you're looking for something quick, fun, and kind of mindless, I think this is a great way to go. So I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Beast That Is Obsidio by Amie Kaufman and J. Kristoff. I am like so sad that this is over, but oh my god, it was so good! I had such high expectations for this story. I've talked about audiobooks for the past 3 books, but this is such a unique reading experience for this series because listening to the audiobook while following along with the story creates such a cinematic experience almost because it is a really visual story. Like there's pictures and stuff, it's crazy. The format is unlike any other books I've ever read, but the audiobook is full cast and it is just so well done. The cast does an amazing job. It's just a production. Personally, I think audiobook while following along is the perfect way to read this series. I've never actually like just read it, but I feel like you just get so much more immersed in the world and in these characters, and that's exactly what you want to happen because these characters are crazy. The story is crazy. It like is action-packed from the very start and you're like, what's happening? Like what? And I loved seeing all the characters come together in this book, and honestly, by the time I finished it, I just wanted to reread the entire series again because it was that good. So I will probably be doing a reread soon because I just loved it so much. It was amazing. This had me heartbroken, but also so happy, but also like, oh my god. If you're skeptical, just pick it up. Just give it a chance. If you wanted to try this as your first audiobook, I feel like it could be a really cool way to start off because you can start following along and it's just so good. I've been talking about this forever, so let's move on. Next, I read Innocent Traitor by Alison Weir, and by read I mean listen to. Just because I'm writing so much, audiobooks are honestly my savior. Like, they keep me from not having read anything in the month. But I listened to The Lady Elizabeth by Alison Weir on audio and I really loved it, and this one I unfortunately didn't enjoy quite as much. It was still really good. This follows Lady Jane Grey, who is the 9 Days Queen. You guys might know know her from My Lady Jane by the Lady Janies, which is so good. So from that book, I've been really intrigued by Lady Jane Grey, and this is a historical fiction by an actual historian. So there are fictional aspects to it, but obviously the historian knows what she's talking about. I can't really speak to the historical accuracy because I don't really know. But in my opinion, it was a very enjoyable read. I really loved the character of Jane Grey. I think her life is just so sad because she has so many people using her as a political pawn and no one really sees her as a human being. And ultimately she has a tragic ending, and it's just a really sad story when you consider the fact that like she's a real person. Like, as much as this is historical fiction, a lot of it is based in fact. So this was a really interesting read, but I felt like I didn't really connect with the characters or the story as much as I did Lady Elizabeth, and maybe it's because I find Queen Elizabeth to be a little bit more interesting. I don't really know, but I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Young Elites by Marie Lu. I feel like Marie Lu does a great job of writing very unique reads. All the books that I've read by her have been very different. They've been kind of similar to other things, but different and unique in their own way. It's like she kind of puts her own twist on common concepts. I don't know if that makes any sense, but this was kind of more of a fantastical version of The Darkest Minds in my opinion, and I really liked it. I had actually started listening to the audiobook like a year ago, last May when I was in Europe, but I never finished it because I was too busy Europing around, I don't know. But I'm really glad that I ended up revisiting it because I felt like it was a great story. I did enjoy the characters thoroughly and all the politics that were kind of going on. It had me on the edge of my seat the entire time, and I think I will probably read the rest of the series. So I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And the final book that I ended up reading in March is Ace of Shades by Amanda Foody. This has been described as being like Six of Crows, and I totally see that, but it's kind of like Six of Crows for beginners, I guess. It's a much easier version. It's not as hard and gritty, but it definitely does still have that gritty note to it because it takes place in a world that's basically like Las Vegas, but like dystopian version. And that was really cool to have all these kind of casino families, all these big players, and it all felt like one big game, which I really liked. It had action, it had that intensity, but it just didn't quite reach the potential I was wishing it would. I think I will probably revisit this as an audiobook because Amanda Foody's debut novel, Daughter of the Burning City, I listened to the audiobook for and I ended up really liking it. So maybe audiobook is the route for me to go with her. So we'll see after I listen to that, hopefully soon. I think I will be continuing with the series because I was just fascinated by the world and the concept, and I really loved the characters, especially our main character whose name I don't know how to pronounce. Would it be Enna or just N? I don't really know. It's E-N-N-E. I don't know. But nonetheless, I enjoyed her, and I really enjoyed Levi as well. So overall, I ended up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So if you guys also watched my March TBR, then you would see that I had 6 challenges that I was trying to fulfill, and I ended up fulfilling all of them. Yay! These are probably out of order, but these are the books that fulfilled the challenges. So for a classic, I read Matilda. Whoopsies! Matilda by Roald Dahl. Quite a few people said this wasn't a classic, but I consider a book a classic for its infamy, not so much the date that it was published. Like, I consider Harry Potter a classic. It's a book that like everyone has heard of, so I don't know, that's just my personal opinion. For a book that was released last month, which would have been February, I read The Traitor's Game by Jennifer A. Nielsen. I also ended up doubling up on challenges, so for a sequel and a new release this month, which would have been March, I read Obsidio by Amie Kaufman and J. Kristoff. And for a new release in the next month, April, I read Ace of Shades by Amanda Foody, which comes out April 10th. And I think the last challenge is TBR Vet, and for that one, I read The Young Elites by Marie Lu because I've had this for quite a while. Since 2016, I believe. So those are all the books that I read in March. Let me know what you guys read in March, if you read any of these books, your thoughts on them, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!